So in this video, we're going to bring the messages of a chat from the backend. Inside our messages page, I'm going to create a new state, messages, and set messages. Use state is going to be empty array. And also we are going to create a state for banner data. Add set banner data. Use state is going to be an object with the name property and profile pic URL. So this banner data state is for this banner right here, where the name of the user is written and the profile picture. And now we're going to create a ref. I'm going to move this one up. And here we are going to create a ref const open chat ID. Use ref. So this open chat ID is basically the query string. I'm going to add a comment here. This ref is for persisting the state of query string in the URL throughout re-renders. So while I was creating this app, the query string, this query string inside the URL right here, this ID was automatically being reset. So when the component re-rendered, query string automatically reset. So it was a bug inside Next.js. I don't know if they have fixed it yet, but to save the value throughout the re-renders of this component, we are going to use this open chat ID ref. This ref is just this ID right here, the query string. I'm going to also add here, this ref is the query string inside URL. So by default, it is going to be an empty strings. And now we are going to create a use effect. I'm going to minimize this one. This is just for the connecting the socket. And after this, so this use effect, we are going to trigger the code inside it whenever the query string changes inside the URL. So router.query.message. And inside this, we are going to create a function load messages. And from inside this load messages function, we are going to emit an event socket.current.emit. We are going to emit load messages, and we are going to pass in the user ID. So the logged in user ID. If you want, you can also pass the token, and then you can verify the token on the backend. I am going to send in the user ID of the logged in user, and we are going to read the ID of the messages with. So this is basically just the ID with whom we have the messages. So this is going to be inside the query string. So router.query.message. So now we are going to listen for this event on our backend. So I'm going to copy this event name, and inside the server.js, socket.on load messages, and we are going to make it an async function. And inside this function, we are going to receive the user ID and messages with. So now inside our util server, I'm going to create a new file, message actions.js. And inside this, we are going to need our chat model. And now inside this file, I'm going to create a function, load messages async. And we are going to receive the user ID inside this and messages with. And we are going to have a try catch here. If there is any error, I'm going to log the error. And I'm going to return an object from here with the error property. And inside the try block, first of all, we're going to look for the user. Await chat model.find one. User with this user ID, which we are receiving inside the params. And we're going to populate chats.messages with. So if you go to the model, chat model, we have the messages with inside the chats array. So our route is chats.messages with, and messages with is an object ID with the reference to the user model. So we are going to look for the chat we have. So const chat user.chats.find chat and chat dot messages with dot underscore ID dot toString, and make sure to add the toString, otherwise it won't work, is equals to messages with. So we are populating the data. That's why we are adding the ._id field. If we were not populating the data, we would have simply written messages with .toString. So this will find us the chat. But if no chat is there, we're going to handle it. If no chat, return error, no chat found. So from this function, if everything goes well, we are going to return this chat. So return chat and save. And now let's export this function. Module.exports load messages. And let's import this function inside our server. And on this load messages event, we're going to call this function await load messages, and we're going to pass in the user ID and the messages with. We are receiving it inside our data from the socket, and we're going to returning an object from here. So it has a chat and an error if there is any error. So we're going to check if no error. So if there is no error, we are going to return the chat from here to our client. So socket.emit messages loaded, and inside the data we are going to pass in the chat. So again, just a simple process. We are calling the function. From this function we can only return two values, a chat or an error. If no error, we are going to emit the event messages loaded and send in the chat. If you want, you can handle the error yourself. I'm going to leave it as is. So now we are going to listen for this event on a client. So I'm going to copy this event name, and inside this use effect, what we are going to do is, I forgot to call this function. So if socket.current, we are going to call this load messages function. So make sure to add this use effect for loading messages below this use effect, because we are making the connection inside this use effect right here, the first one. So it will only work when it is below the use effect, this use effect, so that the socket is already connected when we reach here. So this will call the function if there is a socket whenever the router.query.message changes. And now inside this function, socket.current.on messages loaded. And inside this, we are going to receive the data. So inside a function, we are going to receive the chat. And for now, I'm just going to log the chat so that you can see what we get from our backend. So now if I run my server, so now if I go to my messages page, and here you can see we have a console.log for the chat. Inside it, we have a messages array and the messages with object. So we populated this messages with on the backend. So we receive all the information from the user model. And now if I go back to our VS Code, I'm going to remove this console.log. Now what we are going to do is, we are going to set the messages to chat.messages. So again, I showed you the log. Inside the chat, we have the messages. It is an array. And we are going to call the set banner data. The name is going to be chat.messages with .name. And the profile pic URL is going to be chat.messages with .profile pic URL. And what we are going to do is open chat id.current is equals to chat.messages with ._id. So we are calling the set messages function, setting the messages to chat.messages. Banner data, I showed you again, it is just this data right here, this data inside the name and profile picture. And again, I told you we are going to keep a track of the query string inside the URL with this ref right here. So this value will persist throughout the re-renders of the component. And now in the next video, we are going to start working on the layout for the messages. So I will see you there.